Let's move on to the more exciting question that was more of like, to open the ground and everything like that. So this question, we'll go with Felix first. Okay. So in your opinion, as a DECRA holder as well, which I will briefly touch about that in the later on session, could you please talk about the benefit of publishing before submitting a thesis?
Yeah, I think for me, I guess it's kind of like touching on what I have kind of like briefly discussed from my side. It's more publishing a paper is completely different than just writing a paper. And I think for thesis, especially, we have spent 3 years, 4 years writing a thesis, right? So we hope to publish the thesis, but having a publication before submitting a thesis, we kind of like, I think for me personally, I kind of like realized that like it prepares me for my thesis. Like, one, if it get rejection, it's not that hard, because I know it. I mean, like, you already have experienced rejection before. But like, if I imagine, like, if I work a paper like after 3 years, submit a paper and then get rejection, oh, that would hurt so much. But like, I guess for me, because like, and and when I submit my thesis the first time, it was rejected, right? But I already know, like, it will, rejection is part of this publication process. It's good to have accepted, but sometimes you get rejection. So the benefits of publishing, or even like, try to submit a paper before a thesis and not just only our thesis, it's kind of like give us to kind of like more like better expectation. It helps us to prepare better for when we submit our thesis for publication. And secondly, this is like kind of like what Sarah mentioned, like it also helps us to find a job, because often like when we submit the thesis, now we start looking for a job, right? During around the same time. So when we submit our thesis and we have already paper beforehand, at this point of time, especially when we are expected to have something at least, it will be helpful as well for our job market.
Thank you, Felix. And I also totally agree with you in terms of, because when I relate back to my own experience of submitting my own PhD thesis, two of the examiner, I have one paper except that when I submit the thesis, and two of the examiner actually commented that they appreciate the paper the thesis have been reviewed by peer review articles and then been published and been proven. So I feel like the review process of the thesis became somewhat a lot easier. So I think that is a learning curve for people to take as well. I move back to Sarah. Would you like to add in anything to what Felix have mentioned?
I think Philip pretty much covered the key points of the benefits of publishing before submitting a thesis. And especially like I think nowadays we also I know that a lot of PhD candidates are using the format of including papers in the thesis. So actually it's kind of like like one stone, two birds with one stone, because you have some publication, and then when you submit the thesis, when like Park mentioned, when the examiner look at your publication and they see that the papers has been published in some other journals, then they would have a very more like a favorable attitude towards the thesis. So it helped with the examination process as well. I think when you after you submit a thesis, you would have about like 6 months, 3 to 6 months to wait for to hear from the outcome. So when you have some experience with publishing from your thesis or from a side project before submitting thesis, while waiting for your thesis, you can also focus on, doing some publication during that time as well, with your already have the experience before your thesis submission. So that I think that's also a very good way to prepare yourself for the future career.
Thank you, Sarah. And there are a number of questions coming in the chat. I will read those sooner or later. Thank you. I totally agree with what you have mentioned. Can we touch a little bit of the dark side here in terms of the negative aspect of focusing too much on publishing before submitting your PhD? I asked Sarah first, and then I will move to Catherine.
I guess the negative aspect is more about the work-life balance, because obviously you do publication and then you also have to work on your thesis. So that actually quite lots of work, and time management is extremely important because you need to make sure that you can publish, but also manage expectations from the supervisors and the time frame where we have to complete the PhD by. So I guess that's probably there's some pressure there when we focus a lot on publishing before thesis submission. And yeah, so I think that's the key, the main negative aspect.
Thank you. Catherine.
Yeah, just like Sarah mentioned, I believe this is more psychological. So in case most PhD students, if the topic is not very appealing, they might encounter rejections. So the rejection might become sort of like psychological barrier for them entering academic career and become discouragement. So that might be the case. And also that might, in a way that extended prolong the process of finishing PhD. Some of my PhD students have the problems, so they focus too much on publication and they get rejected and they become so discouraged, so disheartened, they just feel, either some psychological issues or don't want to become academic. So that might be some, just negative aspect.
That is so true that you mentioned that. When I relate back, one of my PhD candidate also in the past have really lose the motivation after do some publication and wasn't success. But at the same time, some people become a lot stronger as well.